All right, everyone, welcome to week 4 of Bridgman Anatomy. This week we're going to be starting on legs. So we're going to start with the skeleton of the legs. So let's quickly go through the pages that I would like to see you study here. All right. So in this we've got page 283 again in this book. We've got a nice shot of the pelvises, the front and the back. Here's another nice page that's got a side view of the pelvis as well as a cutaway for the muscular side and the skeletal side. That's page 285. Here we've got a nice page that's got the anterior view of the skeleton and then some 3/4 views of the anatomy, but you'll be focusing on the skeleton this week. Here we've got the medial view of the skeleton, so this is the inside of the leg. Here's the lateral view of the skeleton. So we've got the pelvis and the upper and lower leg bones from the lateral view, the outer leg. Here we've got the posterior view of the skeleton of the leg. Here we've got some really interesting ones that show the sort of simple block of the skeleton with some of the muscles and where they attach. So that's a really interesting one. That could really be done either week. That's sort of a transitional drawing. That could be done this skeleton week, or it could be done next week when we get to the musculature as well. And then we've got some knees. So a nice close-up of the knees that are really cool. This is the funky one that I was telling you about with it. For some reason, it got printed upside down. So that's actually an upside down knee. And that's it. So those are the skeleton drawings. And those are the pages that we'll be studying this week. If you can't get a hold of the book, you can always pause the video, and hopefully that will be good enough quality to draw from. Okay, so for this drawing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a little bit of a drawing of the pelvis. So I'll start with this side view of the pelvis. We've got the ilium, the crest of the ilium, right along the top of the sort of butterfly wing shape. You've got the anterior superior iliac spine, and then coming down to the anterior inferior iliac spine. These are these two bony protrusions. And again, names not super important, but those are big muscular attachments. Then we're coming down to the pubis. Down to the ischium. Ischial tuberosity. Posterior superior iliac spine, and then we're not seeing the posterior inferior from this angle. Or we are, but it's kind of buried down in here. Then we've got the sacrum, and then the coccyx, the tailbone. So this whole wing shape is the ilium, and then this bony ridge that you see running along the top here, that's the crest of the ilium. Here we've got that acetabulum or acetabulum. Not really sure about the pronunciation on that one. But that's the hip equivalent of the glenoid cavity. That's where the head of the femur, the upper leg bone, will sit right into. Pubic ramus coming back and then coming around to the ischium and back up to the pubis. And that's the simple form of the pelvis. Might want to go ahead and zoom in up here on that. So then we'd have that femur sitting right up into that pelvis. And then coming out to the great trochanter. Which will come down to the shaft of the femur. If we look at that from the back view, then you've got the ilium bridging over to the ilium on the other side. Got the sacrum bridging from one to the other. And so here we can see, here's the acetabulum, and then it flares out. Here's the head of the femur, and then it flares out to the great trochanter. The neck of the femur. The lesser trochanter. And that great trochanter, that's a really important skeletal landmark. In fact, a lot of these are important skeletal landmarks. The crest of the ilium, that's basically the hip bone. The great trochanter is that dimple that you see in the middle of the hip. So those are both really important landmarks. Here we get that posterior superior iliac spine. Same thing over here on this other side. As we pop back over here, again, we're going to want to get those simple planes. So again, we've got our light source coming from above and on the left, so we've got our simple plane here. That great trochanter kind of has a lip on it because it really bulges out there. And we've got this overlap where the pubis is coming out here, and then the ischium kind of loops down and underneath. And you've got that anterior inferior sticking out. And then the anterior superior sticking out. And again, those are really important muscular attachments that a lot of the big thigh and hip muscles attach to those. So again, whenever you see a major bony protrusion like that, make a mental note of it, because odds are something important attaches there. Same thing with this crest of the ilium. Well, a lot of those flank and hip muscles attach to that. That's why there's a big bony ridge, because it gives it a stronger anchor point for it to attach to. So anytime there's a big buildup of skeleton, make a mental note of it, because that's probably an origin or an insertion of a large muscle. And then we've got the ischial fossa, and a fossa is basically just sort of a depression or a valley in the bone. And again, that's usually a signifier that there's a big muscle that's going to sit into that basin. That basin is there as a bowl for a large muscle to sit into. So again, all these bumps and undulations that you see on the skeleton, they're not just there because it's bone and that's what bone looks like. Bone looks the way it does for a specific reason. That's to create little depressions for muscles to sit into, large depressions for muscles to sit into, bony anchors for muscles to attach to, so on and so forth. So then, for instance, we're going to have these large muscles coming in here, like the gluteus maximus. Coming in and attaching to that posterior superior iliac spine. That's what this big bony notch is for that big, strong gluteal muscle to attach to. And then it's going to come down and also attach to that back of the great trochanter. And then continue down onto the iliotibial band. Again, all this stuff we'll be talking more about next week. And then up here, just on the underneath of the crest of the ilium, we've got the gluteus medius. And again, big bony ridge for the origin of that muscle, and then it's going to come down and attach to the great trochanter, another big bony protrusion. So they're not there just for looks. I mean, I think skeletons and bones do look cool, but all those bony protrusions are there for a reason. And that's what creates that dimple of the great trochanter on the outside of that hip, is the fact that all these big muscles, vastus lateralis, all come up and attach to that. So A, it's a big bony protrusion, so it makes an impact, but also all these muscles come in and attach to it, so it also makes a bit of a dimple too, because all those muscles are built up around it. You got the hamstrings coming down. And then the spine comes right up out of that sacrum. In fact, the sacrum itself is pretty much just 4 fused vertebrae. So something like that for studying those skeletons. Again, keep it simple. You don't need to get into them too much unless you really want to and you've got the time to. But simple blocks, learning where those major skeletal landmarks are. In the Bridgman book, he usually has them numbered and diagrammed so you know which ones are important. So now what we'll do is we'll move on to one of the major leg skeletons. Let's probably go ahead and pull that camera out now. So getting that big box of the pelvis. And pelvis, again, it's basically a box shape. So it's basically a simple box shape like so. And then you've got the ilium rounded out, coming down to the sacrum, connecting it in the back. And then we've got the pubis attaching it in the front. But it's basically a box like that. And it sits into that box. So then coming back up over to this guy. Got that pelvis, and then the head of the femur, neck of the femur, great trochanter. Neck of the femur, lesser trochanter. And the great trochanters are actually usually the widest portion of the hips. And the femur won't run at a vertical. It actually angles in slightly. It angles in slightly, and then we'll have the medial condyle. And the lateral condyle. Patella or kneecap sits right in there. Then we'll have the tibial plateau right along the top of the tibia. Medial condyle, lateral condyle of the tibia. And then the tibia will end at the medial malleolus. It's that bump on the inside of your ankle. The shin is slightly bowed, but the reason it looks more bowed than it is that the lateral portion of the shin, it gets covered up by muscle, and you have more visibility of the inside. Really, both are actually kind of curved, but you only see the inner curve, so the shin tends to look more bowed, whereas the femur actually is more bowed, but it's covered up by the adductors, which sort of fill in that gap that make it look less bowed. Along the outside of the tibia, you've got the fibula, which is offset down a little bit, attaches at the fibular articulation, just at the bottom of the lateral condyle. Runs down the outside of the tibia and is actually the same length as the tibia. So the lateral malleolus at the bottom of the fibula actually rides lower than the medial malleolus, because while they're the same length, they're offset slightly. Got that bony crest of the shin. And up here towards the top, you have the tibial tuberosity. That's where the patellar ligament that comes down from the quadricep to the patella and then attaches down on the tibia. There's a little bony protrusion there. And you've got that sort of keystone shape of the patella. And then there's a little patellar fossa that sits right in there. Head of the fibula is a little bit thicker. Thinner shaft of the fibula. Picking that shin up a little bit more. The heads are a little bit blocky, a little bit more angular. And then the shaft tends to be a little bit more rounded, especially up on the femur. Then as we come to the pelvis, much like the glenoid cavity, again, there's typically a bony ring around that joint. In fact, it's probably even a little bit thicker on the hip joint. Pubis comes down. You've got the pubic symphysis, which is where it joins together, and that's actually cartilage. Actually a little piece of cartilage that fuses them together that gives that pelvis a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of give to it where it joins together the two halves. The two halves are actually separate bones that are fused together at the sacrum and at the pubic symphysis, the cartilage there. Again, that crest of the ilium. It's actually a quite substantial bony ridge. You can even feel it. Sometimes you can even see it on people. So it's pretty substantial. And then again, you can map those major connection points, which I listed most of already: great trochanter, patella, tibial tuberosity, malleolus, all those things. But Bridgman's also got them listed in the book, so you don't need to take notes or anything. Just all this stuff is in the book, so. All right, so that's basically the skeleton for the leg. Next week we'll be continuing on to the musculature. Again, reference those pages that I showed you earlier in the video, and those are the pages that your homework should be focused on. Again, you can do every page if you want to, if you've got the time, but those are the pages I'd like to see you really focus on. And again, these larger full leg skeletons, every angle of it is probably of the greatest importance. So if you only have time to do 3 drawings or 4 drawings, you'll want to do the anterior, posterior, medial, and lateral views of the leg bones. So that being said, we are done with the skeleton of the leg, or at least I am. You guys have got a week of homework ahead of you. And I look forward to seeing that homework and seeing what further input I can give you to improving on your drawings. So I will see you next week.